have the pleasure of serving on the Asia-Pacific Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs about this important topic. I rise today to bring attention to the three very important and timely measures that the House will consider this afternoon. These bipartisan measures passed out of the House Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously and include H.R. 543 by Representative Sherman, H.R. 3289 by Representative Smith, and H.R. 4270 by Representative McGovern. And I'm proud to say that I'm a co-sponsor of all three. Over the past 5 months, mass civilian protests in Hong Kong have begun to shed light on the deterioration of the Chinese Communist Party's influence outside of mainland China. Rising resentment in Hong Kong is not simply a result of the ill-fated extradition law championed by Chief Executive Carrie Lam, but the continued encroachment on freedom and liberties by President Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. Despite the 1997 Sino-British Agreement, leaders in Beijing continued their high-intensity political pressure campaign to subdue dissent within Hong Kong, which has emboldened the people of Hong Kong to stand up against Beijing, but more for freedom. And this is illustrated by the people of Hong Kong raising and waving the American flag while burning the Chinese Party's flag. The protesters now maintain 5 demands that Mr. Sherman already talked about: the withdrawal of the extradition bill, drop charges against the protesters, launch an investigation into the police forces, and universal suffrage, which would allow voters to directly pick their leaders instead of hand-picked leaders of their chief executive by Beijing. As a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific and Nonproliferation, I've been extremely outspoken against the continued deterioration of rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. The passage of these important pieces of legislation will send a strong message to President Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party that these abuses will not be tolerated by the international community. Keep in mind that China and Great Britain signed this international agreement in 1997, where it stated that Hong Kong would be an autonomous region, self-ruled, and have an independent judiciary system. Only 22 years into it, Xi Jinping has said, as far as he's concerned, that agreement is null and void. And so you see the people of Hong Kong standing up in protest because they've experienced freedom and liberty. They're willing to risk their life. I just had a group of Hong Kong students come in. These are the ones that are right in the face, right in the forefront of the protests in Hong Kong, and they came to our office begging for help by the American people, by the American government. Now, granted, Hong Kong, we all know, is a province of China, but we also know there was an agreement for 50 years it was to be autonomously ruled with an independent judiciary committee that Xi Jinping and the Communist Party of China have canceled. And I think this is a message for all people of the intent of what China is doing. We, as members of Congress, we have so much more that we represent. It's not a political body where we fight back and forth and discuss different things. What we represent here in America is what people around the world are willing to risk their life for and stand up in front of the face of adversity to one of the emerging superpowers of the world and say, we do not accept your communist authority rule. We want you to honor liberty and freedom. See, the people of Hong Kong, they've experienced freedom and liberties. Xi Jinping and the Communist Party, they can't understand that because they've neither experienced freedom nor liberty. So as we, as supposedly the greatest deliberative body on the planet, this transcends way beyond what we do here. This is standing up for ideals that people around the world are willing to die for. And it's this body that can send a strong message to the Chinese Communist Party, to Xi Jinping, that says we will not let liberties and freedom be taken away from people that have claimed that have known that all their life, and that should be honored by those that are trying to take it apart. And before they want to take it apart, I suggest Xi Jinping and the Communist Party try freedom and liberty. Try democracy for a while. You might like it. And so with that, I think these are three very important bills that should pass through this House unanimously as it passes through the Senate to show that we stand in solidarity with our folks, our friends in Hong Kong. And if not, if we don't send this strong message, it'll embolden China. And I hope our manufacturers and all of our businesses around the world that do business in Hong Kong are paying attention to this, because they are the ones that are creating a business environment that feeds China, that can continue these terrible acts of suppression on liberties and freedoms. So I hope the business community will say, you know what, we stand with the American people. And when it pains me when I see people like the NBA or other organizations, corporations that'll bow down to China, and they do it for profit. It's time that we stand up, not just as Americans, but people that are the bearer of liberty and freedom around the world that the rest of the world looks to. And with that, I yield back my time. Thank you.
Gentleman from Florida yields